Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Let's get into the story. Daniel sat in his luxurious home, sipping a glass of expensive wine while scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging the presence of his wife, Deborah. She had just returned from the market, carrying bags of groceries, sweat glistening on her forehead from the scorching sun. She looked at him with tired yet hopeful eyes, expecting at least a word of acknowledgement, but he didn't even glance at her. Instead, he sighed in irritation as she walked past him, the faint smell of food ingredients lingering in the air. "Ugh, Deborah, do you ever take care of yourself? You always smell like fish or something rotten," he muttered under his breath, wrinkling his nose in disgust. Deborah froze for a moment, hurt flashing in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a small smile. "I was at the market all morning. I'll take a bath soon," she replied softly, hoping to pacify him. But Daniel had already lost interest in the conversation, his eyes glued to his phone as he texted someone else. Mia had become everything Daniel thought he wanted in a woman. She was stunning, charming, and full of life, unlike Deborah, whom he now saw as dull and unattractive. Every moment he spent with Deborah felt like a burden, and every time Mia called, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Mia knew exactly how to manipulate him, making him feel like a king, while in reality, she was simply using him. "Baby, when are we making it official?" Mia had texted earlier that day, referring to their relationship. "I can't wait to be yours completely." Daniel smirked at the message, his ego swelling at the thought of replacing his boring wife with an exotic, fiery woman like Mia. But there was a problem. Deborah was still in the picture. Divorce wasn't something he had thought about seriously until Mia started pushing the idea. "She's holding you back, Danny. You deserve better. You deserve me," Mia had whispered to him last night at the hotel they had secretly met in. And just like that, a seed had been planted in Daniel's mind. Deborah, on the other hand, had no idea that her world was about to shatter. She loved Daniel deeply, despite his increasing coldness toward her. She had noticed the late nights, the secret phone calls, and the perfume that was not hers lingering on his shirts, but she chose to believe that marriage had its ups and downs. She convinced herself that if she just worked harder, cooked his favorite meals, dressed better, made herself more appealing, maybe, just maybe, he would love her like he once did. That evening, she prepared his favorite dish, hoping to surprise him, but when he arrived home, he barely looked at the food. "I already ate," he said casually, throwing his keys on the table. Deborah's heart sank. She had spent hours in the kitchen, making everything perfect, but it was never enough for him. Tears threatened to spill, but she forced a smile and sat down to eat alone. As the days passed, Daniel's indifference grew, and Deborah's loneliness deepened. The home that was once filled with laughter and love had now become a cold, suffocating prison for her. She prayed for things to get better, but deep down, she knew that something was terribly wrong. And she was right. Daniel had already made up his mind. It was time to get rid of her. Mia sat on the edge of her luxurious bed, painting her nails with a satisfied smirk. Everything was going exactly as planned. Daniel was completely under her control, and soon, she would have everything he owned. It wasn't love that brought her into his life, it was greed. She had carefully chosen her words, played the role of the perfect woman, and manipulated Daniel into believing that he deserved better than Deborah. She knew men like Daniel, easily swayed by beauty, flattery, and the promise of something better. She had studied his weaknesses, feeding into his ego and making him believe that his wife was beneath him. "She's embarrassing you, Danny," Mia had cooed over the phone the night before. "You're a powerful, wealthy man. How can you be with someone so plain and unappealing?" Her words had slithered into his mind like venom, poisoning his thoughts against Deborah even further. Mia was in no hurry. She needed to make sure that when Deborah was out of the picture, she would have complete control over Daniel's wealth. Meanwhile, Deborah remained oblivious to the depth of Daniel's betrayal. She had always trusted him, believing in the vows they made on their wedding day. Even though he had become distant, cold, and dismissive, she still hoped that whatever was wrong could be fixed. She had noticed how Daniel had stopped sharing meals with her, how he would avoid eye contact, and how he was always on his phone, smiling at messages she never got to see. But when she confronted him about it, his response was always the same, a sigh of irritation and an excuse about work. "You're always imagining things, Deborah," he snapped one evening when she asked if something was wrong. Maybe if you spent less time worrying about nonsense and more time improving yourself, I wouldn't be so irritated all the time. The words cut deeper than a knife. What had she done to deserve this? She had given him everything, her love, her devotion, her entire world revolved around him. Yet, she felt like an unwanted guest in her own marriage. Mia, however, was not content with simply being Daniel's mistress. She wanted the title of his wife, and she wanted it soon. Every time Daniel hesitated, she pushed harder. "Do you love me, or are you just leading me on?" she pouted one evening as she ran her fingers down his chest. "Because if you're not serious about us, I might have to find someone who is." The thought of losing Mia made Daniel panic. She had become his obsession, his escape from a marriage he had convinced himself was unbearable. "Of course I love you," he assured her. "It's just. Divorce isn't simple." But Mia didn't care about complications, she cared about results. She leaned in, pressing her lips to his ear as she whispered, "Then make it simple. Get rid of her." And so, the decision was made. The next morning, Daniel woke up determined to end his marriage. He no longer saw Deborah as his wife. She was an obstacle standing in the way of his happiness with Mia. And obstacles were meant to be removed. He didn't care about her tears, her heartbreak, or the years they had spent together. All he cared about was finally being free. Deborah stood frozen in the middle of the living room, her heart pounding as Daniel's cold words echoed in her ears. "Pack your things and leave," he repeated, his face void of emotion. She had never imagined that their love, which once felt so unbreakable, would crumble into this, him standing before her, disgust written all over his face as if she were some unwanted stranger. "Daniel, what? What are you saying?" she stammered, tears already welling up in her eyes. Surely, this was just another one of their arguments, a phase that would pass. But the way he looked at her now, like she was beneath him, sent a chill down her spine. He wasn't joking. He truly wanted her gone. "I've made up my mind," he said, crossing his arms. "I'm done with this marriage, Deborah. You don't excite me, you don't inspire me. I can't keep living like this." His words sliced through her like a blade, leaving a wound that would never heal. She collapsed onto the couch, staring at the man she had given everything to. How had it come to this? She had sacrificed her dreams to support him, stood by his side when he had nothing, and yet, now that he had everything, she was no longer good enough. "Daniel, please," she whispered, hoping for even a sliver of remorse in his eyes. But there was none. "Don't beg," he snapped, stepping back as if the mere sight of her repulsed him. "You'll leave one way or another, so pack your things with whatever dignity you have left." Deborah's breath hitched as reality sank in. He had truly stopped loving her. He wasn't the man she had married, the man who used to hold her hand and promise her forever. He had become someone else entirely, someone cruel. And that's when she noticed the smirk playing at the corner of his lips. He was enjoying this. The door swung open, and Deborah turned, expecting to see a friend or neighbor. Instead, her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. There stood Mia, arms crossed over her chest, a satisfied smirk on her face. "Oh, is she still here?" Mia scoffed, tilting her head. "Daniel, you promised she'd be gone by today." Deborah's knees went weak as reality hit her with full force. Mia wasn't just some temporary distraction, she was the reason Daniel wanted her out. You're leaving me for her," she whispered, her voice breaking. Mia laughed, stepping closer. "Sweetheart, he left you for me a long time ago. You were just too blind to see it." Deborah's lips trembled as she turned back to Daniel, hoping, praying, that he would deny it. But all he did was sigh in exasperation. "Just leave, Deborah," he muttered. "I don't love you anymore." And just like that, her world crumbled, tears streamed down her face as she turned away, dragging her feet toward their bedroom to pack. She moved like a ghost, lifeless and empty. She could hear Mia laughing in the background, making jokes about how she should have seen this coming. She stuffed her clothes into a bag with shaky hands, her vision blurred with tears. When she finally stepped out, Daniel didn't even spare her a glance. He was too busy wrapping his arm around Mia's waist. Without another word, Deborah walked out of the house she once called home. And as the door slammed behind her, it felt like the final nail in the coffin of the life she had once known. She was nothing to him now. Deborah wiped her tears as she sat in the courtroom, her fingers trembling as she clutched the divorce papers. She had never thought her marriage would end like this, so publicly, so humiliatingly. The whispers of strangers filled the air as they waited for the proceedings to begin, but the loudest sound in her ears was the echo of Daniel's cruel words. He hadn't just abandoned her. He had made her feel worthless. Across the room, he sat with Mia, his new lover draped in designer clothes, a smug grin on her face as if this was just another one of her victories. Deborah tried to steady her breathing, but nothing could prepare her for what was coming. The judge cleared his throat and began speaking, but all Deborah could focus on was the venom in Daniel's eyes. As the divorce proceedings continued, the judge asked Daniel if he had anything to say. He stood up, adjusting his suit, and with the coldest voice imaginable, he said, "Your Honor, I just want to make it clear that this woman, she was never a good wife. She was lazy, unattractive, and, honestly, she smelled." A gasp filled the courtroom, followed by murmurs from the spectators. Deborah felt her heart stop. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. "She was a burden to me," Daniel continued, his voice firm and unwavering. "A pig who did nothing but make my life miserable." His words were daggers, stabbing her repeatedly in front of everyone. Mia chuckled beside him, enjoying every second of Deborah's pain. She had never felt so broken. She wanted to scream, to fight back, to defend herself. But no words came out. What could she say? That she had loved him? That she had given him her heart? None of it mattered now. She had already lost. The judge turned to her, asking if she had anything to say, but Deborah simply shook her head. There was no point in fighting. She was done. "I accept the divorce," she whispered, her voice barely audible. And with that, the judge finalized it. Just like that, her marriage was over. She didn't ask for alimony. She didn't ask for anything. She just wanted to be free of the man who had destroyed her. Deborah walked out of the courthouse feeling like a hollow shell of herself. The moment the judge had slammed the gavel, officially severing her marriage to Daniel, it was as if the last remaining part of her identity had been stripped away. She had entered that courtroom as Daniel's wife, and now, she was nothing but a discarded past. The humiliation still burned deep in her soul, how he had called her a pig in front of strangers, how Mia had smirked at her pain. She had thought she would cry when it was over, but instead, a strange numbness settled inside her. What was left for her now? She had walked into that courthouse a woman with nothing, and she had left the same way. No money, no home, no love. Just the bitter taste of betrayal and regret lingering on her tongue. Her feet carried her aimlessly through the city, each step feeling heavier than the last. The bustling streets were a cruel contrast to the emptiness inside her. People laughed, lovers held hands, and business people rushed to their destinations, completely oblivious to the woman whose world had just shattered. Deborah found herself in front of a small cafe, her stomach twisting with hunger, but she ignored it. She had barely eaten in days. The pain in her heart was enough to keep her full. She pulled her coat tighter around her body, shielding herself from the cold wind that howled through the streets. As she stared at her reflection in the cafe's window, she barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Her once vibrant eyes were now dull, sunken from lack of sleep. Her lips, which once curved into genuine smiles, were now a thin, lifeless line. Who was she without Daniel? The question haunted her as she walked away from the cafe and into an empty park. She sat on a bench, staring blankly at the trees swaying in the wind. Memories of her past life played in her mind like a cruel movie she couldn't turn off. The nights she had stayed up waiting for Daniel to come home, the countless times she had ignored the signs of his infidelity, and the way she had loved him so unconditionally, only to be repaid with betrayal. For the first time, anger flickered inside her. How had she allowed herself to become this weak? How had she let a man dictate her worth? She had given Daniel everything, and in return, he had thrown her away like garbage. But no more. She refused to be a victim any longer. Taking a deep breath, she wiped her tears and stood up. She may have nothing now, but she would rebuild. She would rise from this, stronger and wiser. She wouldn't let Daniel's cruel words define her. If he saw her as a pig, then fine. She would become a pig that built its own empire. The thought ignited something inside her, a spark of determination she hadn't felt in years. With that, she walked away from the park, her steps no longer heavy with despair but fueled by the beginnings of resilience. Daniel had taken everything from her, but he would never take away her will to survive. Daniel leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips as he swirled the whiskey in his glass. The divorce had gone smoothly, just as he had planned. Deborah was finally out of his life, and now he was free to be with Mia. He had expected to feel some sort of loss, maybe even a sliver of guilt, but all he felt was relief. He took a long sip of his drink, savoring the warmth that spread through his chest. This was the life he had always wanted, a life free of his boring wife, a life with excitement, passion, and a woman who truly understood him. Mia was everything Deborah wasn't: bold, confident, and unapologetically seductive. She knew how to make him feel like a king, and that was all that mattered. But as he turned to look at Mia, who was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone with disinterest, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that something was off. She had been acting differently since the divorce. Before, she used to shower him with affection, but now, it was as if she barely noticed him. "Babe," he called out, setting his glass down. "Why don't we go out tonight? Celebrate our freedom?" Mia barely looked up. "I have plans," she said dismissively. His brow furrowed. "With who?" She smirked. "Don't be so clingy, Daniel. It's not a good look." The casual way she dismissed him sent a strange feeling crawling up his spine. Wasn't this what he wanted? A carefree relationship? So why did her indifference bother him so much? As days passed, that feeling only grew stronger. Mia became colder, more distant. She stopped greeting him with her usual enthusiasm, stopped cooking for him, stopped even pretending to be interested in their conversations. Whenever he reached for her, she would pull away, claiming she was tired or busy. And then there were the phone calls, the ones she took in hushed tones, always walking out of the room whenever he was nearby. Suspicion gnawed at him, but he shook it off. He was being paranoid, right? Mia had fought so hard to be with him. There was no way she was already losing interest. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had made a terrible mistake. Then, one night, the truth slapped him in the face. He came home earlier than usual, expecting to surprise Mia, only to find her wrapped in another man's arms. The sight sent a wave of rage crashing through him. "What the hell is this?" he roared, his voice echoing through the apartment. Mia barely flinched. Instead, she simply smirked, adjusting her dress as she turned to face him. "Oh, Daniel," she sighed. "You really thought I loved you?" His stomach twisted painfully as the man beside her, Andrew, placed a possessive hand on her waist. "This was all a game to me," Mia continued, her voice dripping with amusement. "And guess what? I won." Daniel stood frozen, his breath catching in his throat as the words sank in. "You really thought I loved you?" Mia's voice was laced with mockery, her eyes gleaming with amusement as she watched the devastation settle on his face. Daniel clenched his fists, his heart pounding wildly against his ribs. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but deep down, he knew the truth. He had been played. Used. Tricked into throwing away the woman who had been loyal to him for a mere illusion. His stomach churned as he looked at Andrew, the man who stood beside Mia, wearing a smug grin. The same man who had been with her all along, the real father of the child she carried. The betrayal was unbearable. Mia crossed her arms, tilting her head as she steadied him. "You're looking at me like I'm a monster," she said, feigning innocence. "But darling, you made it so easy. You were so desperate to believe I was better than her. So desperate to be free of your boring wife that you didn't even question what I asked of you." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "And now? You're trapped. You signed the contract, remember? That little clause that guarantees I get everything if we ever split?" Daniel's blood ran cold. He had been so blinded by love, or what he thought was love, that he had signed his future away. He had thought he was in control, but the truth was, Mia had been the one pulling the strings all along. And now, she had won. Why? The word barely escaped his lips, his voice hoarse. He couldn't understand it. He had given her everything, sacrificed everything for her. How could she betray him so easily? Mia's smirk widened. Because, darling, she said, stepping closer, men like you are meant to be used. You think you own the world, that women should bow at your feet just because you have money. But the truth is, you were never the smart one in this relationship. She leaned in, whispering in his ear, I was. Her words cut deeper than any blade. He had never felt so powerless, so utterly broken. Andrew chuckled, wrapping an arm around Mia's waist as if Daniel wasn't even standing there. You might as well leave, Daniel, he said, his tone filled with mock pity. This house? This wealth? It's all Mia's now. And soon, we'll be starting our family together. Daniel's vision blurred with rage, but what could he do? He had nothing left. Mia had stripped him of everything, the woman he had abandoned, the wealth he had worked for, the life he had built. And now, he was nothing. Daniel stumbled out of the house that had once been his kingdom, but now felt like a graveyard of his mistakes. The air was thick with humiliation, the realization of his downfall weighing down on his shoulders like an unbearable weight. He had once walked these streets with confidence, with power, but now he was just a man who had lost everything to greed, lust, and his own foolishness. The city lights flickered mockingly around him, but he barely noticed them. All he could see was his failure. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel found himself spiraling further into despair. No job, no home, no love. He had never thought he would end up here, reduced to nothing, wandering aimlessly through the city that once celebrated his success. His so-called friends had turned their backs on him, unwilling to be associated with a man who had fallen from grace. The money was drying up quickly, and soon, he found himself sleeping in cheap motels, eating whatever he could afford. The Daniel who had once looked down on Deborah, who had called her a pig in court, was now living like a stray dog. One evening, he found himself standing outside a luxurious boutique, staring blankly at the glowing sign above the entrance. Deborah's Empire. His breath caught in his throat. Could it be? The name was bold, powerful, nothing like the timid woman he had once controlled. His heart pounded as he watched through the glass, and there she was. Deborah. She stood at the counter, speaking confidently to a group of employees who hung on her every word. She looked different, stronger, happier, untouchable. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. While he had been drowning in regret and misery, Deborah had risen from the ashes he left her in. She had built an empire while he had lost his own. Daniel's legs felt weak as he watched her laugh with ease, her once dull eyes now glowing with determination. He had called her a pig, but now, she was a queen. And the worst part? She hadn't even spared him a second glance. The next day, Daniel found himself standing outside Deborah's boutique once again. His pride screamed at him to walk away, to accept his fate, but his desperation was louder. He had lost everything, and she was the only one who could save him now. With a deep breath, he stepped inside, his heart hammering against his chest. The air was filled with the scent of expensive perfumes and fresh fabrics, a stark contrast to the cold, empty world he had been living in. As he approached the counter, Deborah finally looked up. And the moment their eyes met, he knew, this was not the same woman he had left. Deborah's gaze was unreadable as she folded her arms across her chest. Daniel, she said, her voice calm but firm. What are you doing here? The confidence in her tone made him feel even smaller. He cleared his throat, forcing a smile. Deborah, I made a mistake. The words felt foreign in his mouth. I was a fool. I hurt you, and I regret everything. But Deborah didn't waver. Her lips curved into a smirk, one that mirrored the very one Mia had given him when she destroyed him. It was poetic justice. You regret it? She echoed. Or are you just regretting that you lost everything? The question stung. Daniel swallowed hard, shame washing over him. Please, he whispered. Give me another chance. I don't have anyone else. For the first time, true fear gripped him. What if she said no? What if he was truly alone in this world? He had never known what loneliness felt like until now. Deborah let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. You called me a pig, Daniel, she said, her eyes cold. And now, the pig has built a kingdom while the prince has fallen. So tell me, why should I save you? Daniel remained on his knees, his breath ragged as he looked up at Deborah with desperation in his eyes. He had never imagined that the day would come when he would be the one begging, but here he was, reduced to nothing, pleading for mercy from the very woman he had once scorned. His hands trembled as he reached out toward her, but Deborah didn't move. She didn't flinch. Instead, she looked down at him with the kind of cold detachment that sent a shiver down his spine. She had changed. She was no longer the broken woman he had belittled, no longer the helpless wife who had clung to him despite his cruelty. She was powerful now, confident. And she had no reason to show him kindness. "You expect me to help you?" Deborah's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge of bitterness beneath it. "After everything you put me through? After calling me a pig in front of the entire courtroom?" She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Do you know how much that hurt me, Daniel? Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep because I believed your words? I thought I was nothing without you. But now—" She spread her arms, gesturing to the empire she had built, the boutique that bore her name in glowing letters. "Now, I see that losing you was the best thing that ever happened to me." Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Deborah, please," he whispered. "I was stupid. I was blind. I let Mia manipulate me, and now I have nothing left. She used me, she destroyed me." His voice cracked as he continued. "You were the only person who ever truly cared about me. I see that now. I was a fool to leave you. I regret it more than anything in this world." His words were raw, filled with an anguish he had never felt before. But Deborah's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. "Regret doesn't change the past, Daniel," she said firmly. "You made your choice. You threw me away like I was worthless. And now, you expect me to save you?" She shook her head, her gaze unwavering. "You're not here because you love me. You're here because you have nowhere else to go." The truth of her words struck him like a slap. He couldn't deny it. He had been selfish all his life, taking without giving, assuming that people like Deborah would always be there when he needed them. But now, for the first time, he was alone. Truly alone. Tears burned in his eyes as he realized there was nothing left to say. Deborah wasn't going to save him. And she shouldn't. She had suffered enough because of him. With a final look of defeat, he lowered his head and forced himself to his feet. The weight of his own choices pressed heavily on his shoulders as he turned away, walking out of the boutique and into the cold, unforgiving night. This was his punishment. He had thrown away the best thing in his life, and now he would live with that regret forever. And the worst part? He knew he deserved it. Deborah watched Daniel disappear into the night, his shoulders hunched in defeat. She exhaled deeply, feeling neither joy nor sadness at his suffering. She had moved on. There was no satisfaction in seeing him broken, only the reaffirmation that she had made the right choice by refusing to help him. Her heart had hardened against him the moment he had humiliated her in court, calling her a pig and discarding her like trash. Now, she had a new life, a prosperous business, and a husband who cherished her. She owed Daniel nothing. As she turned back to the boutique, her assistant, Angela, rushed toward her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Angela had been watching the scene unfold from inside the store, her eyes filled with concern. Deborah nodded, offering a small smile. "I'm fine, Angela. Just a ghost from the past." She walked into the store, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. The boutique had become her sanctuary, a place where she had rebuilt herself from nothing. She was no longer the helpless woman who had begged Daniel to love her. She was Deborah Lawson, a name respected in the fashion industry. Later that evening, Deborah arrived home to find James waiting for her. The sight of her husband filled her with warmth. James had been her rock, the man who had shown her what love truly meant. As she stepped into his embrace, she sighed contentedly. "Daniel came to see me today," she murmured against his chest. James stiffened but remained calm. "And what did he want?" he asked, brushing his fingers through her hair. Deborah pulled back and looked into his eyes. "Help. He's lost everything." James chuckled dryly. "Karma has a way of settling debts." Deborah nodded. "It does. But I feel nothing for him now. I don't hate him, but I don't pity him either. I'm just free. James kissed her forehead. That's all that matters. You've built a beautiful life, Deborah. No one can take that away from you. She smiled, realizing how true those words were. She had won. Not because Daniel had lost, but because she had found happiness without him. She had found herself. Daniel wandered through the empty streets, his clothes soaked with sweat and dust. He had never imagined his life would come to this, homeless, penniless, and abandoned by the woman he had given up everything for. Mia had taken everything from him. His properties, his businesses, even his dignity. The realization of his stupidity hit him harder than ever as he stumbled into a cheap motel, using the last bit of money he had left to pay for a night's stay. As he sat on the worn-out bed, he thought about Deborah, about the woman he had cruelly tossed aside. Deborah had loved him. Despite his flaws, despite his coldness, she had stayed by his side, believing in their marriage. And what had he done? He had called her a pig in front of the court, humiliated her, and thrown her out as if she meant nothing. Now, she was rich, happy, and successful, while he was nothing but a beggar at fate's mercy. He could still see the look in her eyes when she refused to help him. There was no hatred, no revenge, just indifference. And that hurt more than anything. He was nothing to her now. The next morning, he decided to go back to Mia's house. He had no other choice. Maybe, just maybe, she would take him back, even if it meant enduring her cruelty. But as soon as he stepped into the house, the reality hit him harder than he expected. Mia and Andrew were laughing together, completely ignoring his presence. "What the hell are you doing here?" Mia asked, her tone sharp and irritated. "I need a place to stay," Daniel muttered, his pride completely shattered. Mia smirked. "Stay? Here? Oh, Daniel, you really are pathetic." Andrew chuckled, wrapping his arm around Mia's waist. "Mia, just tell him the truth. You were never in love with him. You only used him to get what you wanted." Mia turned to Daniel, her eyes filled with amusement. "You were useful to me, Daniel. That's it. But now? You're nothing." She reached into her bag and tossed a few bills at him. "Take this and disappear from my sight." Daniel's heart clenched as he realized the full extent of his downfall. He had lost everything, including his dignity. Deborah stood at the window of her new home, looking out over the bustling city streets as the sun began to set. The warm hues of the evening sky reminded her of how far she had come. She had started from nothing, abandoned by the man she had once loved, struggling to find her place in a world that seemed determined to tear her down. But now, she had everything she needed. Her boutique had flourished into one of the most popular shops in the city, and her marriage to James had brought a peace she had never known. It was a life she had built with her own two hands, free from the chains of her past. James had been her anchor through it all. He had been patient with her, understanding her fears and doubts, even when she struggled to let go of the pain Daniel had caused. He had never once pressured her to forgive Daniel, never asked her to forget the hurt. Instead, he had loved her for who she was, strong, resilient, and capable of greatness. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was real, built on trust and mutual respect. Deborah knew that James was the man she was meant to be with. One evening, after a long day at work, James came home with a surprise. He had booked a trip to Paris for them both, just the two of them. It was a dream come true for Deborah, a chance to escape the pressures of everyday life and indulge in the romance of the City of Lights. As they sat on the balcony, sipping wine and watching the Eiffel Tower sparkle in the distance, Deborah realized that she had everything she had ever wanted. Her heart was full, her soul at peace. She no longer needed to look back. "James, thank you for everything," she said, her voice soft with gratitude. He smiled, kissing her forehead. "You deserve it all, Deborah. You've worked hard for this. You've earned your happiness." For the first time in a long while, Deborah felt truly content. She had found the love she deserved, and she had let go of the bitterness that had once consumed her. Her past with Daniel was just that, her past. The future was bright, and she was ready to embrace it fully. Daniel paced the small motel room, his mind racing as the events of the past few days replayed in his mind. His life had spiraled completely out of control. He had nothing left, not a home, not a job, and certainly not the woman he once claimed to love. Mia had used him. He had been nothing more than a stepping stone for her, a way for her to climb higher. She had gotten everything she wanted, and he had been left with nothing but regret. His relationship with her had been built on lies, and now he had to face the consequences. His thoughts kept drifting back to Deborah. The look in her eyes when she had refused to help him still haunted him. She had no hatred in her heart, no anger. She had simply moved on, leaving him behind to fend for himself. He realized now that he had never truly understood her. Deborah was strong, independent, and capable of thriving without anyone. It was something he had never given her credit for when they were together. He had taken her for granted, assuming that she would always be there, waiting for him to change. But he was wrong. Determined to make amends, Daniel reached out to several friends he had known in the business world, hoping to secure a job, anything that would help him get back on his feet. But every attempt ended in rejection. He was a pariah. No one wanted to associate with him, especially after his public disgrace. He had burned all his bridges, and now he had to face the harsh reality of his choices. Mia had left him, and he had alienated everyone who might have helped him. There was no one left. In a moment of desperation, Daniel picked up his phone and tried calling Deborah. The phone rang several times before it was answered. He could hear the calmness in her voice as she said, "Hello, Daniel." His heart pounded in his chest. This was his last chance. "Deborah, I need your help," he began, his voice shaky. "I've made so many mistakes, and I don't know what to do anymore. Please, just listen." But Deborah interrupted him, her tone cool and resolute. "I don't think there's anything you can do, Daniel." The line went dead. Mia was sitting in the luxury car with Andrew beside her, enjoying the feeling of power that came with her newfound freedom. She had won. Daniel was nothing more than a memory now, a man who had served his purpose. She had manipulated him, used him for his money, and now she was free to live her life without him. Andrew had taken his place in her bed, and together they would build a life far removed from the chaos Daniel had brought into her world. As they drove through the city, Mia's thoughts turned to the clause Daniel had signed in their marriage contract. It had been a stroke of genius on her part, ensuring that no matter what happened, she would come out on top. She had controlled every aspect of their relationship, and now that she had everything, she wasn't going to let go. If Daniel had any thoughts of trying to come back into her life, she would remind him of the price he would have to pay. He had signed away his assets, and Mia was entitled to every last cent. The phone rang, and Mia answered it without hesitation. "Mia," came Daniel's voice, weak and desperate. "I need you. I don't have anywhere else to go." Her lips curled into a smile, a cruel smile that sent a shiver down Andrew's spine. "Oh, Daniel," she purred. "Did you really think I would take you back? You signed that clause for a reason. You gave me everything I wanted, and now you have nothing." Andrew looked at Mia with admiration. "You're amazing, you know that," he said. Mia leaned in for a kiss, her eyes glinting with cold amusement. "I've always known what I wanted, Andrew," she replied. "And now, I have it all. Daniel will never be a problem for me again." Daniel sat in the dingy motel room, staring at the blank walls as the silence pressed down on him. He had been trying to piece his life back together, but every attempt had ended in failure. His pride was gone, his confidence shattered, and he had no one to turn to. Mia had destroyed him, but it wasn't just her fault. He had allowed it. He had allowed his life to spiral out of control. He had never truly understood what Deborah had meant to him. She had always been there, patient and loving, while he had been selfish, focused on his own needs and desires. But now that she was gone, he realized how much he had taken her for granted. She had been the only one who had truly cared about him. And now, she was out of his reach. He had lost her for good. In the quiet of the room, Daniel's thoughts drifted to his daughter. Mia had told him that she was pregnant, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the child might not even be his. Mia had always been deceitful, and he had never truly trusted her. But it was too late now. Even if he wanted to fight for his child, he had no means to do so. His name meant nothing anymore. He was nothing. With a bitter sigh, Daniel picked up the phone and dialed Deborah's number one last time. The phone rang, but it went to voicemail. "Deborah," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. I've lost everything, and I realize now how wrong I was. I took you for granted, and I regret it every day. I don't expect you to take me back. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry." The call ended, and Daniel collapsed onto the bed, his heart heavy with the weight of his own mistakes. Deborah sat in her elegantly furnished office, reviewing the latest business reports from her boutique empire. It was astonishing how far she had come in just a few years. From being a discarded wife with nothing to her name, she had built an empire that not only brought her wealth but also the kind of respect she had never received when she was married to Daniel. Her boutiques had expanded beyond the city, and her name had become one of the most well-known in the fashion industry. She had proven to herself and the world that she was not a weak woman meant to be cast aside. However, her thoughts kept returning to the voicemail she had received from Daniel the previous night. His voice had sounded broken, filled with regret and sorrow. He wanted her forgiveness, but could she really grant it? After everything he had put her through, the humiliation in court, the cruelty, the heartless words, was it even possible to forget? James had always told her that holding on to bitterness was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer, but Deborah wasn't sure if she was ready to let go of that pain just yet. She knew Daniel had lost everything. Word had already spread about how Mia had stripped him of all his assets and left him with nothing. Some part of her, the part that had once loved him, pitied him. But the stronger, wiser part of her knew that his suffering was his own doing. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. She wasn't the same woman who once waited in vain for his love. She had moved on. As she stared at the phone, contemplating whether to call him back, James entered her office. He saw the look on her face and immediately knew what was troubling her. Without hesitation, he walked over, cupped her face gently, and said, "Whatever decision you make, just make sure it's for you, not for him." His words struck a chord in her heart, reinforcing the truth she already knew. She had to think about herself, her happiness, and her future. Daniel was just a part of her past, nothing more. Daniel was running out of options. He had tried everything, applying for jobs, seeking help from old acquaintances, and even considering leaving the city to start over somewhere else. But everywhere he turned, doors were slammed in his face. He was no longer the powerful businessman he had once been. People had seen how he had fallen from grace, and no one wanted to associate with him anymore. The few people who still answered his calls offered nothing but pity. Some even laughed at his predicament, reminding him of how he had once treated those beneath him. It was a bitter pill to swallow. He had never imagined himself in such a position, reduced to nothing, begging for chances that never came. The worst part was knowing that all of this was his own fault. The money he had left was barely enough to sustain him. He was staying in a rundown motel, eating cheap meals, and avoiding debt collectors who were after him for unpaid loans. His pride had once been his greatest asset, but now it was his biggest enemy. He had been too proud to see Mia for who she really was, too proud to treat Deborah with the love and respect she deserved. And now, he was paying the price for his arrogance. One night, as he lay on the worn-out mattress in his motel room, his phone rang again. He scrambled to pick it up, hoping that maybe Deborah had finally called him back. But when he saw the name on the screen, his heart sank. It was Mia. His hands trembled as he answered the call. "Daniel," her voice was smooth, mocking. "How does it feel to have nothing?" He clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. She had taken everything from him, and yet, she still had the audacity to call him. "You'll regret this, Mia," he spat, but she only laughed. "No, darling. You're the one who regrets everything." And with that, the line went dead. Mia was on top of the world, or at least, she believed she was. She had everything she had ever wanted, wealth, luxury, and complete control over her own life. Daniel was nothing more than a memory, a stepping stone she had used to climb higher. Andrew, the man she had always truly wanted, was now by her side, and together, they lived in the mansion Daniel had once called his own, but something unexpected happened. One day, as Mia was attending an exclusive party filled with the city's elite, a journalist approached her with a smirk on his face. "Mia, how does it feel knowing the world is about to find out the truth about your marriage to Daniel?" Confused and slightly irritated, Mia raised an eyebrow. What truth? She asked, her voice laced with arrogance. The journalist chuckled. Oh, you don't know? There are leaked documents showing that the clause in your marriage contract was signed under fraudulent circumstances. Mia's face paled. She knew exactly what that meant. If the contract was invalidated, she would lose everything, her claim to Daniel's properties, her access to his money, and the power she had stolen from him. That's impossible, she hissed, her heart pounding. The journalist simply smiled and walked away, leaving her in a state of panic. For the first time in years, Mia felt fear creeping into her perfect world. She rushed home, demanding Andrew find out who was behind the leaks. But deep down, she already knew. Daniel had finally fought back. Even in his lowest moment, he had managed to find a way to expose her. And if she wasn't careful, she would soon be left with nothing. Her empire of lies was beginning to crumble, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Daniel sat in the dimly lit lawyer's office, his hands clenched together as he listened to the legal expert explain the situation. The fraudulent clause in his marriage contract had been exposed, and there was now a solid case against Mia. He had spent weeks gathering evidence, proving that she had manipulated him into signing the contract while he was intoxicated. Now, the law was finally on his side. You have a good chance of reclaiming what was stolen from you, the lawyer assured him. But it will take time. Mia won't go down without a fight. Daniel nodded, determination burning in his eyes. He had lost everything because of her, but now, he was ready to take it all back. Meanwhile, Mia was facing public disgrace. News outlets were filled with stories about how she had tricked Daniel into signing away his wealth. Even those who had once admired her were now turning their backs on her. Andrew, sensing the inevitable downfall, began distancing himself from her as well. For the first time, Mia was feeling what it meant to be truly alone. As Daniel walked out of the lawyer's office that day, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. He wasn't seeking revenge anymore, he was seeking justice. And for the first time since losing everything, he truly believed that he could rebuild his life. Daniel never imagined that one day he would be sitting in a courtroom, fighting for the very empire he built with his own hands. As he walked into the grand, high-ceilinged courtroom, a place where justice was supposed to be served, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had always believed himself to be a smart businessman, someone who could never be outwitted, but now he was paying the price for his arrogance. Across the room sat Mia, dressed in an expensive designer suit, her face void of any remorse. Her lawyer, a ruthless legal expert known for destroying his opponents, smirked at Daniel, as if already declaring victory. The contract Daniel had foolishly signed while drunk was now the weapon being used against him, and he realized that his fate hung in the balance. If he didn't fight this with everything he had, he would lose everything: his properties, his reputation, and even his dignity. He clenched his fists under the table as his own lawyer, Mr. Howard, prepared the opening argument. The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators eager to witness the downfall of a once successful businessman. Daniel watched as Mia leaned back confidently, whispering to her lawyer while flashing a smug smile. She had played the game well, and Daniel had walked right into her trap. The judge, a stern woman with an intimidating presence, called the session to order. Mr. Howard stood up, his deep voice commanding attention. Your Honor, we have reason to believe that the contract in question was signed under fraudulent circumstances. My client, Mr. Daniel Carter, was intoxicated at the time of signing and was manipulated into an agreement that was grossly unfair and exploitative. Mia's lawyer, Mr. Hastings, immediately objected. Your Honor, Mr. Carter is an experienced businessman. He cannot claim ignorance of a contract he willingly signed. Being intoxicated is not a valid excuse under corporate law. The judge nodded, signaling for both lawyers to proceed with their arguments. Daniel swallowed hard, knowing that the outcome of this battle could determine the rest of his life. As the trial continued, Mr. Howard presented documents, messages, and recordings proving that Mia had been planning this scheme long before she convinced Daniel to divorce Deborah. He presented hotel receipts showing her meetings with Andrew, the real father of the child she had forced Daniel to claim. More shockingly, there were private messages between Mia and her secret lover, discussing how they would ruin Daniel and take everything from him. The evidence was damning, and for the first time, Daniel saw a flicker of panic in Mia's expression. She had underestimated him, thinking he would simply roll over and accept defeat. But Daniel was now a man with nothing to lose. His empire was already crumbling, and if he didn't fight back, he would be left with nothing but regret. Your Honor, the evidence before you clearly shows a pattern of deception, Mr. Howard continued. Mia used my client, manipulated him, and now seeks to walk away with his fortune. We urge the court to declare this contract null and void on the grounds of fraud and coercion. Mia, realizing that the tide was turning against her, suddenly changed her tactics. She stood up dramatically, her eyes filled with fake tears. Your Honor, this is all a lie. Daniel was a cruel and abusive husband. I only did what I had to do to protect myself and my unborn child. Gasps filled the courtroom as she pulled out what appeared to be photographs of bruises on her arms and legs. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest as he realized Mia was about to play her final card, painting him as a monster to gain sympathy. Mr. Howard quickly intervened. Objection, Your Honor. These claims have never been made before, and there is no police report or medical evidence to support them. The judge studied the photos before sighing. We will review all the evidence carefully before making a ruling. Court is adjourned for today. As the session ended, Daniel walked out of the courtroom, his mind racing. Mia was desperate, which meant she was running out of options. But this legal battle was far from over. He had to stay strong because the real fight had just begun. The next day, Daniel arrived at the courthouse determined to reclaim his life. The tension in the air was suffocating as he walked past the media frenzy outside. Cameras flashed, journalists shouted questions, and headlines speculated about the fate of his fortune. He ignored them all, keeping his eyes fixed ahead. His lawyer, Mr. Howard, was already inside, reviewing their next steps. Meanwhile, across the courtroom, Mia sat with Andrew, whispering into his ear while her lawyer, Mr. Hastings, prepared his counterattack. Mia's last-minute attempt to paint Daniel as an abuser had shaken things up, but Mr. Howard was confident they could dismantle her lies. We have new evidence, Mr. Howard said in a low voice. A former maid of Mia's has come forward. She claims to have witnessed Mia plotting against you and is willing to testify. Daniel exhaled sharply. This could be the break they needed. He glanced over at Mia, who still looked too confident for someone on the verge of being exposed. She had another trick up her sleeve, he was sure of it. As the session began, Mr. Howard called the maid, Anita, to the stand. She was a middle-aged woman, her hands trembling slightly as she took the oath. Tell the court what you told me, Mr. Howard urged gently. Anita took a deep breath. I worked for Mrs. Mia Carter for over 2 years. I saw things. Heard things, she began. She never loved Mr. Daniel. She used him. She told Andrew many times that once she got what she wanted, she would throw Mr. Daniel away like garbage. Gasps filled the courtroom. Mia shifted uncomfortably but kept her composure. She would meet with Mr. Andrew late at night, laughing about how foolish Mr. Daniel was. She even celebrated when she got him to sign that contract. Mr. Hastings immediately objected. Hearsay, Your Honor. This is just a disgruntled employee trying to get revenge. But before the judge could respond, Anita pulled out a small recording device. I recorded everything, she said, her voice shaking but firm. The courtroom erupted in whispers as the judge allowed the audio to be played. Daniel felt his stomach tighten as Mia's voice filled the room. Once he signs, he's finished. He'll never know what hit him, she laughed. Andrew, just wait. Soon, we'll have everything, and that idiot will be out in the streets. The recording went on, revealing how Mia manipulated Daniel and planned her betrayal. For the first time since the trial began, Mia's mask cracked. Her hands gripped the table, and her face turned pale. Andrew shifted uncomfortably beside her, suddenly realizing that they might not be as untouchable as they thought. Mr. Howard turned to the judge. Your Honor, this is clear evidence of premeditated fraud. We request that this contract be declared void immediately. The judge looked at Mia with piercing eyes. Mrs. Carter, do you have anything to say in your defense? Mia's lips quivered, but she remained silent. The courtroom buzzed with excitement. Daniel finally had the upper hand. Mia's lawyer quickly requested a recess, but the damage was done. Outside the courtroom, Mia turned to Andrew, her face twisted in fury. "You told me no one would find out," she hissed. Andrew shrugged, stepping away from her. "This is your mess, Mia. I'm not going down with you." The betrayal in his voice was unmistakable, and Mia's panic deepened. She was running out of options. Meanwhile, Daniel stood outside, taking a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, he felt hope. The fight wasn't over yet, but he was no longer the helpless fool Mia had manipulated. He was going to win. The next hearing was scheduled, and Daniel knew he had to stay focused. He wasn't just fighting for his wealth, he was fighting for justice. He had let himself be deceived before, but never again. As he walked to his car, he received a message from an unknown number. "Be careful, Daniel. Mia is dangerous." He frowned. Someone was warning him. But who? And what did they know? The next day, Daniel arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual. The weight of the previous day's events still clung to him. Mia had been cornered, her fraudulent schemes exposed in front of the judge, and yet, he knew she wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. The cryptic warning he had received the night before still echoed in his mind. "Be careful, Daniel. Mia is dangerous." Who had sent it? Was it a friend, a stranger, or someone working on the inside? He couldn't afford to be careless. As he stepped inside, he noticed Mia sitting in the defendant's area with a smug expression, a complete contrast to her nervous breakdown yesterday. Something had changed. She was planning something. Daniel turned to his lawyer, Mr. Howard, who was already flipping through documents. "She looks too confident," Daniel muttered. "She has something up her sleeve." Mr. Howard nodded. "I've seen this before. She might be trying to drag out the case, or worse, she has another lie to throw at us. But we're ready for anything." As the trial resumed, Mia's lawyer stood with newfound confidence. "Your Honor, my client has crucial evidence that will change the course of this trial." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Mia stood, her voice dripping with false pain. "Your Honor, my husband, ex-husband, Daniel, abused me. I was afraid to speak out before, but now I have no choice." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Daniel's fists clenched. This was a new low, even for Mia. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. Mia continued, wiping fake tears. "I have witnesses. My personal assistant, some of my friends. They all know what I went through." Mr. Howard stood immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. This is a desperate attempt to manipulate the court. We demand proof." The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mrs. Carter, do you have any concrete evidence?" Mia hesitated, then turned to her lawyer, who pulled out photos. There were pictures of bruises on her arms and face. Daniel's stomach twisted. He had never laid a hand on her. Where did she get those? The judge frowned as he examined them. "Mr. Howard, do you wish to refute this?" Mr. Howard remained calm. "Yes, Your Honor. We request a forensic analysis of these images. We also have security footage from the mansion that will prove that Mr. Daniel never harmed his wife." The judge considered for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. The trial will be adjourned until the results are examined." As the session ended, Daniel turned to Mr. Howard. "What now?" Mr. Howard smirked. "Mia underestimated us. The photos are fake, I guarantee it. We just need to prove it." But as they left the courtroom, Daniel noticed someone watching from the shadows, a man in a black suit, eyes locked on him. The warning he had received suddenly felt even more real. Mia wasn't just playing legal games. She was willing to destroy him at any cost. While waiting for the forensic analysis, Daniel decided to dig deeper into Mia's plan. He hired a private investigator, a man named Cole, who had a reputation for exposing high-profile scams. Within days, Cole had results. The bruises in Mia's photos? Completely staged, he said, showing Daniel enhanced images. The lighting, the shadows, they don't match her skin tone. It's classic photoshopping. Daniel exhaled in relief, but Cole wasn't finished. "There's more. Her so-called witnesses? Paid actors. I traced transactions leading to their bank accounts. She's been bribing them to testify against you. Daniel clenched his fists. He had expected deception, but this level of manipulation was beyond cruel. Can we use this in court? He asked. Absolutely, Cole replied. And one more thing. That warning text you got? I found out who sent it. Daniel's heart pounded. Who? Cole slid a file across the table. Her former lawyer's assistant. Apparently, they overheard Mia and Andrew discussing their final move. They knew you needed to be warned. Daniel scanned the file, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. Someone on the inside had risked everything to help him. But what was Mia's final move? Back in court, the results of the forensic analysis were in. The judge examined the findings and frowned. Mrs. Carter, the court has determined that your evidence is fraudulent. The bruises in your photos were digitally altered, and your witnesses were bribed to testify. Gasps erupted in the room. Mia's face turned red with anger. Mr. Howard stood. Your Honor, this is blatant perjury. We request that all of Mrs. Carter's claims be dismissed and that her contract with Mr. Daniel be declared void due to fraud and deception. The judge nodded. I agree. The contract is nullified. Daniel's heart leaped. He was free. Free from the manipulations, the lies, and the legal noose Mia had placed around his neck. But as he turned to leave, Mia suddenly screamed, You think you've won? You haven't seen the last of me. She was escorted out, her eyes burning with fury. Outside the courthouse, Daniel felt the weight lift off his shoulders. He had fought, he had suffered, but he had finally won. He turned on his phone and saw a missed call, from Deborah. His chest tightened. He had wronged her in the worst way possible. But for the first time in years, he felt like a man who could face his past. He needed to see her. He needed to apologize. As he walked away from the courthouse, the future seemed uncertain, but one thing was clear, his fight was over. Mia was finished. But was it too late to mend the wounds of his past? He was about to find out. Daniel stood outside the courthouse, his phone still vibrating in his pocket with an unanswered call from Deborah. His heart raced as he paced back and forth. The relief of winning the case against Mia was short-lived, replaced by an overwhelming sense of guilt. He had spent years treating Deborah like she was worthless, like she was the cause of all his dissatisfaction. Now, everything he had known about love, trust, and loyalty felt like a lie. Daniel had been blinded by his own ego, his desires, and his fear of facing the truth about his relationship with Deborah. And now, as the reality of his mistake set in, he realized that the woman he had wronged was living a life that was nothing like what he had imagined. She was thriving, successful, and, most importantly, happy. The thought stung him, but he knew he had to face her, no matter how uncomfortable or painful it might be. He quickly dialed Deborah's number, his fingers trembling as he held the phone to his ear. The seconds felt like hours as the call rang. Finally, her voice came through, sharp yet warm, though Daniel could tell there was an edge of hesitation in it. Daniel, why are you calling me? What do you want now? Her words hit him like a slap. He had no right to ask anything of her, yet he knew that if he didn't try now, he might never get another chance. Deborah, please, just hear me out. I know I don't deserve it, but I've changed. I'm not the man I was before, and I need you to know that. I've made mistakes, terrible ones, and I regret every moment I treated you like I did. You were right to leave me. I don't want anything from you, just the chance to apologize properly. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Daniel could feel his heart pounding in his chest, every word hanging in the balance. He waited, holding his breath. Finally, Deborah spoke. I'm not sure you understand the weight of what you've done, Daniel. It's not about you anymore. It's about me. I had to rebuild my life after you tore everything apart. I have my own success now, and I'm not interested in letting you back into my life, not when you treated me so horribly. Her words were firm, and Daniel's heart sank, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. I don't expect forgiveness right now, Deborah. I just need you to know that I regret everything. I hurt you, and I don't think I can ever make that right. But I'm not the same person I was when I let you go. I've learned, and I'm trying to be better. Please, just let me prove it to you." There was another pause. Daniel thought the conversation was over, but then Deborah spoke again, her voice quieter now. "You don't get to decide how I heal, Daniel. I'm sorry, but I can't do this with you." She hung up before he could say anything else, leaving Daniel standing alone in the empty courthouse parking lot, the weight of his failures crushing him once more. Days passed, and Daniel couldn't shake the memory of his conversation with Deborah. Her words haunted him, reminding him of the person he used to be and the pain he had caused. No matter how many times he replayed the conversation in his head, he couldn't escape the fact that she had no reason to trust him anymore. He had built his empire on lies and deceit, and now it seemed like all of it was crumbling. He looked at his reflection in the mirror one morning and barely recognized the man staring back at him. He had let Mia manipulate him, let his pride and fear control his actions, and in the process, he had destroyed the one good thing in his life, his marriage to Deborah. Yet even as he wallowed in self-pity, Daniel knew he had to take action. The guilt wouldn't go away if he just sat around, waiting for Deborah to come to him. He had to prove that he was truly sorry and that he was willing to do whatever it took to make amends. But how could he do that when Deborah had made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with him? He needed to show her that he had changed, that he was no longer the man who called her a pig in front of a judge. It wasn't enough to just apologize, he needed to show her with his actions that he was a different person. He reached out to a few of Deborah's old friends, those who still kept in touch with her. Through them, Daniel learned about her new life. She had opened a boutique business, which had quickly become a success. Her boutique wasn't just about clothes, it was a place where women could come together, support each other, and find strength in their struggles. Daniel marveled at how Deborah had taken everything that had been thrown at her and turned it into something positive. He realized that he was the one who had held her back for so long, that he had prevented her from becoming the woman she was meant to be. And now, it seemed like she had finally found her calling. It hurt him to know that he was no longer a part of her life, but he couldn't deny how proud he was of her. The woman he had once tried to break was stronger than ever. If only he could have seen it sooner, maybe things would have turned out differently. But now, he was left with nothing but his regrets. As Daniel stood in the small cafe near her boutique, he thought to himself, maybe this is how it was always meant to be. The months following his conversation with Deborah were the hardest of Daniel's life. He threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from the overwhelming sense of loss that seemed to follow him everywhere. He'd spent years chasing after the wrong things, and now that he had everything he thought he wanted, wealth, power, and even Mia, he realized how empty it all was. Mia's betrayal had been the final straw. She had used him, manipulated him, and turned his life upside down. He had no one left to blame but himself. Daniel had no idea what the future held, but he knew that he needed to change. He didn't want to continue living in the shadow of his mistakes. He had to make things right, not just with Deborah, but with himself. And so, he began the long journey of rebuilding. He took a step back from his business, hired new people to run things, and started volunteering at local charities. It was the first time in years that he had felt like he was doing something meaningful. For the first time, he wasn't just working for his own gain, he was working to help others. It wasn't easy. Every day, Daniel had to face his past, confront the lies he had told, and accept the consequences of his actions. But he was determined. He knew that redemption wasn't something that could be achieved overnight, but every small change he made brought him closer to the man he wanted to become. It was during one of his charity events that Daniel received a call from one of Deborah's friends. She told him that Deborah had been going through a rough time, her boutique had been broken into, and she was struggling to keep things afloat. Without hesitation, Daniel offered to help. He had no idea if Deborah would accept his assistance, but he knew that he couldn't just sit idly by while she faced another challenge. This time, he wouldn't make the same mistakes. He would show her, with his actions, that he was no longer the man who had abandoned her. Daniel waited anxiously in the corner of the boutique, watching as Deborah worked behind the counter. She hadn't seen him yet, and he was unsure of how she would react. The last time he had seen her, she had been cold, distant. He didn't expect anything different today. But he was determined to make this right. When she finally looked up and saw him, her expression was one of surprise. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice guarded but not unfriendly. I heard about what happened, Daniel began, his voice steady. I want to help. I can give you the resources to fix this. You don't have to do this alone. Deborah stared at him for a long moment, her gaze piercing. He could see the skepticism in her eyes, the disbelief. You want to help me? She asked, as though the idea was foreign to her. After everything you've done? Daniel nodded. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I want to show you that I've changed. I can't undo the past, but I can help you now. You've built something beautiful here, Deborah. I want to make sure it stays that way. Deborah's eyes softened, but she didn't respond immediately. For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, Deborah spoke. Why should I believe you? Her voice was quiet, but the hurt in it was unmistakable. Daniel's heart ached, but he was ready to answer. Because I'm no longer the man who abandoned you. I'm no longer the man who thought he could control everything and everyone around him. I've spent enough time reflecting on my mistakes, and I want to be someone who can help, not hurt. For the first time in a long while, Deborah smiled. It was small, but it was real. I don't know if I can forgive you, Daniel. But I'm willing to see if you mean what you say. Daniel's heart swelled with hope. This was a start, a small, but significant, step toward redemption. Deborah didn't know what to make of Daniel's sudden change of heart. She had spent years believing he was incapable of genuine remorse. The Daniel she knew had always been arrogant, selfish, and dismissive of her feelings. Now, standing before her, he looked different, not just in appearance, but in presence. There was no smugness, no condescending tone, only a man who seemed burdened by his past mistakes. She had no intention of forgiving him just yet, but she also wasn't the kind of woman to reject help when she needed it most. If Daniel wanted to fix what had been broken, let him prove himself. Fine, she said, crossing her arms. If you really want to help, then show me. But this doesn't mean I trust you, and it definitely doesn't mean I've forgiven you. Daniel nodded, relief washing over his face. I don't expect you to trust me overnight, he admitted. But let me do this. Let me help rebuild what was taken from you. With that, he wasted no time getting to work. He reached out to his contacts and arranged for her boutique to be repaired immediately. Security measures were upgraded, and within a week, her store was back in perfect condition. Deborah watched him closely the entire time, looking for any sign of an ulterior motive. But for once, Daniel asked for nothing in return. It was a strange feeling, seeing him act selflessly. As the boutique reopened, customers returned, and business flourished once more. Deborah had built this place from the ground up, and she wouldn't let anything or anyone take it away from her. Yet, as much as she wanted to deny it, she couldn't ignore the fact that Daniel had made things easier for her. He had stepped in and fixed things without hesitation, without expecting anything back. It confused her, made her question everything she thought she knew about him. One evening, after locking up the boutique, she found Daniel waiting outside. I never got the chance to say thank you, she admitted reluctantly. Not that it changes anything between us, but I appreciate what you did. Daniel gave her a small smile, one that lacked the arrogance she once despised. You don't have to thank me, he said. I'm just glad I could help. For the first time in years, Deborah saw a glimpse of the man she had once fallen in love with. But was it real, or just another one of Daniel's well-crafted performances? She wasn't sure, but something told her that this time, he might actually mean it. The weeks passed, and Deborah found herself in a strange place, somewhere between resentment and acceptance. Daniel had done what he promised, helping her without once overstepping his boundaries. He never pushed her to talk about the past, never forced his way back into her life. Instead, he remained at a distance, watching as she thrived. It should have made things easier, but it didn't. If anything, it made her more confused. Why now? Why after all these years had he suddenly decided to change? One evening, Deborah sat in her apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and humiliation, yet she had emerged stronger. She had proven to herself that she didn't need Daniel, that she was capable of building a life without him. But now that he was no longer the cruel man who had once dismissed her, she wondered if she had been holding on to her anger for too long. Could she truly move forward if she never let go of the past? The next day, she called Daniel and asked him to meet her at a quiet cafe. He arrived on time, looking unsure of what to expect. "I don't know why I asked you here," she admitted, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's just closure." Daniel nodded, understanding. "I'll take whatever you're willing to give," he said. "Even if it's just a conversation." For the first time, they talked, really talked. Not about their past mistakes, but about who they were now. Deborah told him about her dreams for her business, her goals for the future. Daniel, in turn, spoke about the changes he had made in his life, the ways he was trying to be a better person. As they parted ways that evening, Deborah realized something: she didn't hate Daniel anymore. She wasn't ready to forgive him completely, but she no longer carried the same bitterness that once consumed her. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. As she walked away, she felt lighter than she had in years. No matter what the future held, she knew one thing for certain: she had won. Not just against Daniel, but against the pain that had once defined her. She was finally free. That's the end of the story. What did you learn about the story? Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Thanks for watching.